Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Hi, hello-y, my name is Loey, and recently over on my TikTok, I have been sharing you guys' scary stories. I cannot believe how well they performed. Me being surprised when I realized you guys just like to listen to me yap no matter the platform, but I've been really happy with the response that I've gotten. If you don't have TikTok, by the way, and you ever want to keep up with these, I've also been posting them on my second channel as I post them onto TikTok. That's youtube.com/loeybug. But I've told enough of them that I thought that we could do a little compilation video today of some of you guys' scariest stories that I have told on my TikTok. So these are scary TikTok stories coming straight from you, baby. And we're gonna start with the most popular one, which is a two-parter about a mimic experience. One more thing, if you ever want to submit your scary stories to me, you can do so by using my email. I'll have it listed down below, but it's loeylane@gmail.com. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy these scary stories. Sit back, get yourself a drink and a snack, and get ready to get spooked, because when I tell you these get weird, they get weird. I had a follower send me their mimic/doppelganger story, and it is terrifying. According to her, it all kicked off in 2021, and her husband would be gone a lot because he was in the military. He would be like out in the field for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and during those times, she would just feel a presence in her home. At the time, this really freaked her out because she was pregnant with their first child, their daughter, and so she would light prayer candles every single night before she went to bed. It would just give her comfort. And she would just leave them lit throughout the night. And one night she wakes up and they're all out. And she thinks it's weird, but she has to go to the bathroom. So she kind of just ignores it, gets up. And as she's going to the bathroom, she hears what sounds like a woman singing from her daughter's nursery, which is literally right next to the bathroom, like singing, humming. She said it sounded like a lullaby. The nursery at the time was just being used for storage because, of course, she was pregnant. When she leaves the bathroom, like rushing to her daughter's nursery, the humming is just getting louder and louder and louder, and it doesn't stop until she actually opens up the door. Obviously, there was no one there humming. And about 2 weeks later, her husband is home from the field. Well, her husband had just finished using the bathroom. He's kind of coming out to the living room, and when he sees her, he like jumps out of his skin. He's so scared. And she like laughs. She just thinks like maybe she startled him. And he says to her, "Did you just sit down there?" And she says, "No, why?" Like she's on the couch with her cookies, she's under a blanket, she's comfy. And that's when her husband tells her that he just saw her walk into their daughter's room. And he was really confused when this happened because it looked just like her, except for some reason she had long black hair. Over the next couple of months, her husband swears this keeps happening. Like he will see the back of her head, except it's never the back of her head. She just has this long black hair, but she's always wearing the same clothes and it looks just like her. And she'll be walking into a room as he's kind of like walking past. In October of 2021, she gave birth to their first child, their daughter, and she found out shortly after that that she was pregnant with their son. And nothing happens until about a month after her son is born in 2022. And of course, it was one of those times where her husband was gone in the field and she's going to the bathroom. I don't know why the bathroom is attached to so many weird happenings in this place. But as she's in there, she hears a sound coming from her daughter's nursery. Now this is really concerning because when it happened the first time, she was pregnant with her daughter. Now her daughter like lives in that room. And so she immediately gets up from the bathroom. She's going down the hall to investigate. And it sounds like there's something tapping in her daughter's room. My cat has joined us for the story, but she goes into her daughter's room. She's like, "What is this tapping sound?" And that's when she realizes it's the blinds in her daughter's room, like hitting the window over and over and over again, as if somebody is sitting there and like moving them back and forth. She also then notices that her daughter is like upright in her crib. Her hair is a mess. Her daughter is like freaking out, crying. So she immediately scoops her daughter up. She takes her to the bedroom. She has her other child in there. Both of the babies are crying and screaming and everybody's freaked out. And she's on the phone with her in-laws like, "What do I do?" Her father-in-law comes to the home to come check things out, just make sure everything's okay. And of course, nobody's there. She's kind of like, "I'm sorry I called you out. I swear to you, I know what I heard." And shortly after this, that apartment, that place where they lived, actually got broken into. And so they immediately moved to a townhome, which is where the rest of this story takes place.
She probably at this time wasn't thinking much about the paranormal activity and the weird mimic stuff from the last place because they're in a new home and she had bigger fish to fry. Like their place actually got broken into. But she would sometimes notice that her daughter's closet light would be on when she would enter into the room, and she just would ignore it. She was like, I don't really want to bring this energy into the new place. I'm not going to acknowledge it. Until one day her husband calls out to her and he says, were you just watching me go to the bathroom? And she calls back from the living room. She's like, no, I'm on my phone. I'm watching YouTube in the living room. And he says, I saw you again like last time, but this time you were peeking around the door at me while I was using the bathroom. And of course she's freaked out because her husband just saw that thing again after so much time without any activity. And so she starts cleansing the space pretty routinely and the activity dies down again. And once again, she's like, okay, we're in the clear. And then there's an incident where they have a bunch of guests over and her daughter drops a glass and she decides to put her daughter into her room in this new townhouse just so they can clean up the glass and she won't get hurt on any of it. Her husband is like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. You stay with her. And so she stays in the room with her daughter. They're like laying on the floor playing with toys when suddenly her daughter sits up and she's like a year and a half, 2 years at this point. And she lets out this blood-curdling scream while looking into her closet, the same closet where the lights had been coming on occasionally, and the original person who sent me this email doesn't know why. She walks around this room and she's telling whatever this is, like, no, leave her alone, get out of here. Eventually, her daughter calms down. And at the time of sending me this email, she had said that her husband was leaving for 9 months. And she felt like the thing was going to act up again once he was gone. I didn't find this email until literally like today, and it was sent a year ago. So I'm going to email her back and ask if anything else happened. But in my original email, she asked for advice. So if you guys have any ideas for how to get rid of this thing, if she's still dealing with it, let her know down below. She'll probably read the comments. But yeah, this is such a terrifying mimic story. So what do you think? Stay spooky, friends. I have an update for the insane mimic story that one of my followers sent me, and it is so terrifying. If you didn't see the first part, I'm going to give you a quick summary. My follower had been experiencing what seemed like a mimic in multiple homes, something that sounded like it was humming from her daughter's nursery, something that presented itself to her husband as her, like as my follower, but with long dark hair. And it was all happening in one apartment that they then moved out of, and in their new townhome, it started happening too. And where we left off in part 1 was that at the end of that email that I was sent by my follower, she said that she was really nervous about her husband being gone for 9 months with the military because she felt like whatever this was waiting for him to leave. The problem is that she sent me that email a year ago and I just found it like last week. So I reached out to her and asked her for an update, and what she gave me is crazy. A month into her husband leaving for 9 months, I mean, she is just feeling really nervous. She said the separation anxiety is kicking in hard. One night, she wakes up around midnight, and when she wakes up, she was so hot when she was sleeping, there was like a puddle of sweat beneath her, but the house is freezing. And she's like, whoa, this is like way colder than it usually is. Not weird for her to sweat during the night, but it is weird for the house to feel this freezing. And she gets up from bed to go adjust the thermostat. And as she's going downstairs, she ends up falling down like 4 stairs. The weird part is that she hears something giggling after this from her daughter's room. She thought maybe her daughter heard her falling down the stairs and was like giggling at her. So she pokes her head into her daughter's room. Her daughter's dead asleep. And something I mentioned in the last video is that her daughter's closet light kept turning on its own. And when her mom looks in that closet, the light is on. She ends up lighting a prayer candle for her daughter, and as she goes to check the thermostat, it says it's 72, and she's just really confused why it is so cold in her house. She really just doesn't know what to do, and so she reaches out to someone she describes as a lovely medicine woman who practices herbalism. Basically, she gives her the rundown of what's going on. I think that the person who sent me this email also sells like crystals and stuff, so I think they're like business acquaintances. But anyways, this woman says that she's going to do a candle reading for my follower. And when the candle reading comes back, basically the herbal medicine lady is like, somebody put evil eye on you. She ends up doing some things, including an egg cleanse, and eventually gets like 6 months of reprieve from whatever this thing is. It seems like this thing just comes and goes at random. Things have been chill for months. So one night, she's laying in bed, just scrolling on her phone through TikTok, and you know how it is when your eyes just start getting really heavy, and she's kind of falling asleep when suddenly it feels like her entire body just starts shaking. She has this cold chill run right down her back, and she feels like she needs to open her eyes again. And she's laying on her husband's side of the bed where she's been sleeping while he's been away, and as she turns over, she sees what looks like a woman in a long white dress with matted hair staring back at her. And it's like hovering in the air, staring at her, she says. And it had these like long talon claws. And she is completely terrified. It is dark in the room at this point. It's just like her and her cell phone. So she grabs her phone, turns on the flashlight. And of course, when she shines the light where she saw this woman, nothing's there. And she says this thing that almost seems like her protection mantra, which is, if you are not from the light, be gone from my sight. And it seems like this always gives her a little bit of peace. So she says it, and then she tries to go back to bed. Somehow she falls asleep, but of course, something wakes her up. This time, it's what sounds like somebody whispering. And so she opens her eyes, and on the side of the bed, crouching in front of her, is the woman in the long white dress with the matted hair. Except this time there were no like distinguishable features. She was just a silhouette. And this woman whispers, "Now you see me." And the woman who sent me this email literally grabs her iPhone and chucks it at this lady. Of course, doesn't hit anything. The phone just goes flying to the other side of the room. She was terrified. Did not sleep in her bedroom again after that. Decided to sleep in the living room. In the month that followed, a lot of weird things did happen, but nothing to that extent. And then what's really strange is that she ends off the email by saying that when her husband got back, they ended up separating. But what's interesting is since then, since she separated from her husband, nothing has happened ever again. She said, "I think whatever it was attached to my husband, not me or my children, and it didn't like how strong of a presence I made in his life. But who knows?" No matter what, I'm really thankful for this update, and it's just really weird because her husband was the one who saw what looked like her with long black hair, and then she sees this thing with like a long white dress and like matted hair. Was it this thing that was like attached to her husband, or so she thinks? I don't know. You guys are gonna have to let me know what you think about this one, but so happy to finally have an end to this story. Stay spooky, friends. I got another email from a follower who had a scary mimic story, and the subject of the email was, "I heard my sister's voice, but she was miles away." Off to a terrifying start. My follower's name is Stacy, her sister's name is Caroline, and Caroline is the older sister who just went off to grad school. Now she's going to grad school out of state, and it's been really bittersweet because she and Stacy are really, really close, but they keep up through kind of constant FaceTiming throughout the day and texting and stuff. But ever since Caroline moved out of state, Stacy has been experiencing something that sounds just like her, but obviously Caroline is nowhere around. So this takes place about 3 weeks ago when Stacy had just gotten back to her city from visiting their parents for the holidays. But it's Stacy's like first Monday back at work, right? And she gets home from her shift and her phone rings and she looks down and it's her sister calling. Now, usually when her sister is going to call her, she'll shoot her like a preemptive like, "Hey, are you free to FaceTime" text. But Stacy picks up, and when she does, the FaceTime screen is just black. Like Caroline isn't there, like something's wrong with the phone, you know what I mean? And Stacy's like saying her name, and she's about to hang up when she hears Caroline's voice come through the phone and say the words, "Come here." Stacy immediately, like her reaction is that this must be a prank. Like Caroline thinks she's being funny. So she tries to call back. She tries to text her. She's not getting a response. Stacy's not really taking this seriously. She's not like concerned or anything. She ends up going to bed and she wakes up in the morning to a text from Caroline that said, "Sorry, I missed your call. I fell asleep early last night." And Caroline's like, "Haha, very funny. Yes, when I called you back because you called me and whispered, 'Come here,' all creepy." But Caroline sent her call log and she had never called Stacy. She obviously thought it was weird, but it was 2 days later that things got much weirder. She's just in her kitchen cleaning up for the day. It's like 9 p.m. as she's doing this. She's winding down the house for the night. And she hears what sounds like footsteps in the like foyer, as if somebody had just walked into the house, but she hadn't heard the front door close. She lives alone, but she puts down her cleaning supplies. She goes and she looks at the front door and she looks at the foyer and nobody's there. And as she is about to turn around and go back to the kitchen and get back to her cleaning, she hears her sister, Caroline, say just the word, "Hi." Like it was her voice, unmistakably, she hears Caroline say hi. And she's like looking around like, did Caroline come from out of state to surprise me? Like, is this another prank? But Caroline is nowhere to be seen. She doesn't even live in state. In fact, their time zones are so different that Caroline is long asleep for the night and Stacy can't even call her about this. But the next day, Stacy calls Caroline and Caroline is pretty creeped out by this. And she's the one who kind of explains the concept of a mimic to Stacy. You know, that mimics are like a paranormal entity that can mimic you, mimic a loved one, and sound just like them to lure you into a false sense of security. And Stacy thinks this stuff is interesting, but she's certainly not like in panic mode thinking there's a mimic in her house. But Caroline is taking this pretty seriously, and she's like, listen, this really isn't something to mess with. Like, don't reply to it, don't engage with it, just ignore it, and it'll go away. Well, that weekend, Stacy goes over to a friend's house, and she gets home pretty late in the evening. And she says that the minute that she stepped into her apartment, everything just felt a little strange. I don't know, the energy of the place was just off, and she's walking through, and she doesn't really know why she feels so on edge, but she's doing a walkthrough of her apartment. And when she gets to her bedroom, her bedding is all rumpled, like somebody had been sleeping in her bed. And at this point, Stacy isn't thinking like something paranormal is going on. She thinks somebody has been in her house sleeping in her bed. So she calls the police, and as she's just literally huddling in her bedroom, waiting for the cops to get there, she notices that this little tiny like ceramic cat that her sister had given her like a knickknack one year on her nightstand, it's always just been there. She notices that it has been turned so that it's facing the wall instead of like out like it always is. But the cops do come and check it out, and they totally like understand why she found it really creepy, but there's no sign of forced entry. It doesn't look like anyone's actually been in her apartment. And she just feels like she is blowing everything so out of proportion at this point. She feels crazy. She feels bad for calling the cops out, and she just wants to go to bed. How she slept in that place after this, I honestly don't know. And as she is falling asleep, from outside of her bedroom window, she can hear her sister's voice saying, "Let me in a really soft voice, like, let me in, right outside of the window. And she thought this was interesting the next day because that was the direction that the little ceramic cat had been turned to face. And she was so terrified by this experience. I feel so bad for her. She ended up just like crying her eyes out and sleeping on the couch that night, like as far away from her bedroom as she could be. And she didn't really know what to do or what to think. Like, was the apartment haunted? Did she have this attachment because it sounded like her sister? She obviously talked to Caroline about it. I mean, this is so beyond like maybe her sister was playing a prank or something one night. You know what I mean? Like, this has gotten really, really, really scary for Stacy. Stacy said in the email, "I realized later that the first call might have been sort of an invitation. It said, 'Come here,' like it wanted me to go somewhere with it. When I didn't do what it said, it tried to come inside itself, outside my window, saying, 'Let me in, let me in.' I know this sounds insane. It is insane, but it's what I experienced." Stacy hasn't always been like a staunch believer in the paranormal, but this has truly gotten her, and she just thinks the best thing to do is to move out of her place. So she's spending a lot of time packing up her apartment. I'm also sorry for the insane noises you've been hearing throughout this story. I have a stage 5 clinger in my lap. And as she's moving out, she just feels like the activity is getting somehow even worse. Lights are flickering overhead as she's packing up boxes. She'll swear she's put something into one area of the house so that she can pack it, and it just disappears. But she knows she is never spending another night in this apartment. So she's literally packing up the place. She decides to leave around 10 p.m. She packs up an essentials bag. She's going to go stay at a friend's house. She's not sleeping in this apartment, and good for her. However, this entity did not seem very happy about this, because as she gets closer and closer to leaving, she swears it just feels like something is staring at her. And right as she's about to leave, she hears what sounds like footsteps running down the hallway of her apartment building, and her sister's voice saying, "Come here, come here, come here." and her heart is pounding, my heart is pounding. She has to call a friend, like a 6'5" guy friend, to come and get her, and he does, and of course nothing is in the hallway and nobody is there, but that is it. She's like, movers can handle this, I'm not going back. She ends up eventually getting moved out. All of the stuff gets put into storage for the time being, and she's kind of trading off her time, spending the nights with her friends in the city and going home to stay with her family on the weekends. And she's just doing this until she can find another place. But she could never go back to that apartment after what happened to her there. And ever since, she hasn't heard her sister's voice. She hasn't really had anything paranormal happen to her. So hopefully whatever this is attached to that apartment and will stay put, because oh my God. She says at every little noise, she still jumps thinking that it's this thing again and she's going to hear her sister's voice. But as of now, it seems like whatever it was is attached to that apartment, and I really, really hope it leaves her alone. That is one of the craziest mimic stories I've ever heard. And so terrifying. Literally, the phone call in the beginning felt like the plot of a horror movie. Stay spooky, friends. One of my followers sent me their scary story about the time that their best friend got possessed right in front of them. My follower's name is Finn. Their friend's name is Steve. At the time, they're both in college together, and after classes one day, they go to hang out in a park. This takes place one night in November around like 8 p.m., so it was really dark outside. And for whatever reason, I guess they were feeling adventurous, they decided to do the Estes method, which is basically a method of ghost hunting in which you deprive yourself of your other senses in order to more accurately communicate with spirits. People will wear blindfolds, they'll put on noise-canceling headphones, and they'll listen to a spirit box. Now, they were broke college kids. They didn't have access to a spirit box, which makes this whole thing even weirder because all they used was white noise. So Steve is sitting there with his eyes closed and he has on these noise-canceling headphones and he can't hear anything Finn is saying. And Finn starts to ask questions like, how old are you? What's your name? But whatever this thing is responding with we or us when it answers these questions. So think like Finn asks, is anybody there? This thing responds through Steve, we are here. This is also definitely an activity that they've done before, and so Steve is really used to doing this, and he mimics the voices of whatever it is that he hears. And so what Finn is hearing is Steve mimicking this very childlike voice, and it's really creepy off the bat. There's no light outside, it's pitch black, so the only source of light that they really have is Finn's flashlight on their phone that they're using to like illuminate Steve during this entire session. Throughout, Finn is hearing these really weird noises in the park and they're getting really uncomfortable, but as they keep going, something really weird happens. Steve pauses for a moment and then again in this childlike voice asks Finn, can we use his hands? And Finn has never heard anything like this before. So they ask, why would you want to use Steve's hands? And they said, we want to clap. Finn was like, that's not my choice. You'll have to ask Steve if that's something that you can do. And apparently Steve said yes, because all of the sudden he raises his hands and starts clapping. Like clapping and clapping and clapping, all while making this really creepy giggling noise, which Finn says is terrifying, like they've never heard Steve giggle like this. So giggling and clapping and saying, we clap, we clap, we clap. Finn is like trying to keep calm, keeps asking these questions, when suddenly Steve rips the headphones off. And Finn is like, oh, thank God you're here. Like, you're not gonna believe what just happened. And Finn is giving Steve the rundown, but Steve is looking at them really strangely. Like his pupils looked weird. Something was just off about his face. And Steve is just staring at Finn like really blankly with this creepy smile on his face that just looked so unlike him. So Finn is explaining what just happened to Steve while Steve was under for the Estes method, and Steve is just looking at them with this creepy smile on his face, and he doesn't look like himself. And so Finn just kind of stops and is like, you don't look like you. Is everything okay? Like your face doesn't look like you. And Steve isn't saying anything, and Finn is gradually getting more and more freaked out when suddenly it's like Steve just snaps out of it. You know that feeling when you're falling right as you're about to fall asleep and you like grab onto the sides of your bed? It was almost like he had that experience. He suddenly like jolts upright and he's looking around and he's like, why am I sitting up? I don't remember doing that. And Finn is just looking at him like tears in their eyes, like, are you joking me right now? Like, please tell me you're playing a prank. And Steve has literally no idea what just happened, no memory of the last several minutes. Steve was obviously also really concerned. The two of them just book it out of there and head to the nearest street lamp where they're in the light before eventually heading home. And this isn't really something Steve would do as like a prank. They've done these Estes method sessions before. And Steve has never done anything like this. And Finn just ends off the email by saying, to this day, it's one of the paranormal experiences that freaks them out the most. And they can just remember exactly how Steve's face looked when he was just staring at them and giggling and clapping and smiling. I don't know, this one is really, really, really terrifying. So I'm curious to know what you guys think about it. Stay spooky, friends. One of my followers sent me her email about the time that her Instagram stalker showed up to her workplace. And it is like the epitome of a let's not meet scenario. My follower's name is Cass, and when this takes place around 6 years ago, she says she's like 16, 17. And she's working a 12-hour shift this day. So during her break, she is just scrolling through different social medias, you know, Facebook, Instagram, the works, when she sees in her notifications that some random guy has liked 10 to 15 of her photos and left really inappropriate comments on them. Things like "so gorgeous" and "wow, sexy." And obviously Cass is really freaked out by this, immediately blocks this person, and just goes on with her day. I mean, this is just something where that was creepy and you block and you move on because you don't want to think about it for too long. So she's going on with her day, and she actually works at a salon. So she's just washing up some things in the back when one of her coworkers comes back from their lunch break and asks her, "Hey, do you know this guy?" and goes on to describe like a man, their hair color, eye color, skin color. And Cass is like, "No, not off the top of my head." And her coworker is like, "Somebody was asking for you out front." Like somebody walked up to the coworker on their lunch break and said, you know, "Do you work at the salon?" Coworker says yes. This guy asks, "Do you work with a girl named Cassie?" And the coworker's like, "Yeah." And the guy asks if Cassie has red hair and if they were friends. And again, the coworker's like, "Yeah," but like it's creeping her out, and she ends up going inside. Well, all of this takes place in Australia. And as it turns out, this man also told the coworker that he had flown from Melbourne to where they were, which is like a 10-hour drive or a 1.5-hour flight, to come and see Cass. And Cass just had a really weird feeling, and she went to look at the Instagram profile of the person she had blocked earlier that day, shows it to her coworker, and the coworker's like, "Yeah, that was him." This man who had been commenting on all of these Instagram photos earlier in the day had shown up to her place of work. Don't know how he figured that out. Like, did he know beforehand and he found her social media because he knew her from her place of work? Or was it the opposite? Like, did he find her Instagram and then do some creepy cyber stalking and then find out where she worked? I don't really know. She's super creeped out. I mean, she calls her mom. This is clearly very, very, very serious, but the guy is long gone. And in truth, I'm sure this was a lesson for the coworker as well, that like you don't tell when people are asking about your coworkers and stuff, like don't say anything, you know, especially if they are minors, like in this situation. But the manager of the salon takes this super seriously, gets security, and they are trying to figure out who this guy is, where he is, and just nowhere to be seen, like has left the building. But this is all happening on the same day. Cass has to go to the bathroom. And she's really freaked out to do this because there's not a bathroom in their salon. They work in like a mall, it seems like, or a shopping center or something, and she has to go use the bathroom. Her manager tells her to take her phone with her and to always stay in big crowds, but I'm just sitting here like, why is no one taking the child to the bathroom? A creepy man has just been in the vicinity and nobody is looking after her, but I digress. It happened. This was like 6 years ago. But she goes to the bathroom, and when she comes back out, the guy is standing there in the bathroom hall, and she just freezes, and she's like, "Oh my God, like, is my life flashing before my eyes? Should I scream? Should I run?" Like, she just froze. It's a secluded area. All she can think to do is to start backing up into the bathroom. And the guy tries talking to her like, "Why are you walking away from me, beautiful? Like, I came to see you." He apparently says, "I've been looking at your profile for a while now, and it doesn't take much to be able to find out what state you live in or where you work when you have the right connections." And Cass just literally goes to the bathroom, locks door, and calls security. And I mean, the minute she has security on the phone, the guy takes off. Security comes, and I mean, police have to be called, and she has to give a statement. And she said at first, like, they weren't taking her seriously, but her boss backed her up, and the cops eventually seemed to realize how serious this was. From that point on, she was really, really vigilant in this job and like very on edge, but she never saw this guy again. Nothing ever happened after that, thank the Lord. She says that now she is a kid, and so she keeps all of her social media private because she just cannot fathom something like that ever happening to her again. Thinking that it was this easy for this guy to find her place of work and stuff like that, when she always felt she'd been pretty careful with what she posted online. It just scared the crap out of her. So for her safety and her baby's safety, she's not public on social media anymore. She ends off this email by telling you guys to set your profiles private if you can, and just to be careful with what you post no matter what, because you never know who is online watching you. So stay safe and stay spooky out there, friends. This was a crazy story. I'm back with another follower scary story today, and this one is paranormal. Now, in the email, my follower says that the farm is located in Namibia, and it's incredibly old and belongs in her family. Her father is the current owner. They don't live on the farm, but the people who work on it, who work for her dad, do live on the farm, and it's like she said, 10 kilometers outside of town. There are 4 graves on the property, the oldest one dating back to 1903. Remember this for later. So this follower is named Danielle, and when she's 14, her high school has a youth camp, which normally they would rent out like a campground or something for, but Danielle's father comes forward and he's like, you guys can just use the farm. It's free of charge. We have a campsite. So that's what they do, and it works out really well. But when Danielle gets to the farm, which she's obviously very familiar with, I mean, she's grown up on it essentially, she said that the energy was just really off. Dark, she said. And again, she's used to this farm. Sometimes it gets a little spooky, but this is like a different level. It was very heavy. She's staying in a bungalow with like 6 other girls, and she says the first night she was just really on edge. Like nothing happened, but it felt like something was going to. Then on the second night, they go on a hike of the property. They were learning about stars and constellations, and it's a beautiful night, and she's kind of like starting to forget about all of this, I don't know, weird energy she's feeling. But then part of the way through the hike, she feels like something is watching her, and she's looking around thinking maybe it's like a wild animal or something, and she just sees nothing. But you know that gut feeling, like you know something is watching you. So she's looking around. Eventually she looks up into a tree, and that's where she sees a woman in the tree line, just staring back at her. And her hair was matted. She was wearing like an old style nightgown, and she was just up in the tree, staring back at her. Danielle says her eyes still haunt me. They were bulging, like she could see right through me. And Danielle just didn't know what to do. She didn't want to like draw attention to it. She didn't want to scare anybody, so she just grabs onto one of her friends and she stays quiet until they're back at the campfire later that night. And then she basically has a panic attack, breaks down, and tells everyone what happened. All of her friends understand why she's freaking out, but one friend in particular, who's very familiar with the farm, says, I can't figure out who that woman would be, because they're very familiar with, once again, the 4 graves on the property. Like sometimes they would hear babies crying at night on the farm, and it wouldn't be that surprising because 2 of the graves on the property were that of a 5-day-old baby and a 3-month-old baby who passed away back in the 50s. Super sad. After this, though, terrifyingly, Danielle kept seeing this woman everywhere, all over the farm, constantly watching her with these like bulging eyes. She said she would see her peeking around corners at her or just lingering in the dark. And oh my God, the peeking around the corner with the bulging eyes, absolutely not. Here's where things get really weird. About a month after this camp ends, Danielle ends up going to what she believes at the time is the oldest grave on the property, belonging to a 23-year-old man, and it sits beneath an acacia tree. They wanted to clean up this grave, make it nice for this person, and as they're sort of sprucing up this area, that's when Danielle finds like a slab on the ground, another grave marker. When she uncovers it, that's when she discovers the 4th grave. That belonging to a woman unnamed but called a beloved daughter and wife. There was a name, to be clear, but it just was like long defaced because of the age of the stone slab. They could also see she was born in Cape Town, but that's when something clicks for Danielle, that she thinks that the woman she's been seeing is the woman from this grave, and she's been following her around because Danielle's been walking over this grave every day for years. Nobody knew it was there. And it gets even crazier because when Danielle cleaned this area up, made the grave pretty and nice, she never saw the woman again. To this day, she doesn't know if the woman was trying to reveal herself to ask for help or if she was just trying to be creepy. But either way, the story is terrifying. Stay spooky, friends.
Imagine this. It's late at night, you've just stopped doom scrolling TikTok for the evening, and you are under the covers, snug as a bug in a rug, about to fall asleep, when you hear what sounds like somebody whispering to you. Maybe they say your name. Maybe it just sounds like they're talking. But when you open your eyes, of course, nobody's there. My follower Finn had an experience much like this, and the story that they sent me is terrifying. When Finn was younger, they had some trouble falling and staying asleep. I feel like a lot of us can relate to that. But this problem is made exponentially worse by the fact that when they finally started to fall asleep, something really strange would happen in their room. They said the first time it occurred, they were around 8 or 9, and they were just falling asleep, and it felt like the mattress beside them dipped down, as though somebody sat on the bed. A moment later, they felt something stroking their arm. Thinking it was just their mom, they opened their eyes, but nobody was there in the dark. Obviously, Finn is super creeped out by this, but thinks that they're just imagining it. But as the nights go on, not only does this continue, it gets worse. In addition to feeling like something is stroking their arm, they also begin to hear whispers in the night, what sounds like a woman whispering to them. Some nights it was so vivid that they could literally feel something leaning over them, whispering in their ear, and of course they would, bolt upright and nothing and no one is there. This happened to Finn almost every single night for 2 long years, until one day it just stopped with no rhyme or reason. It's been a long time since then, and Finn had kind of forgotten about the whole thing, but they still live with their parents in that very same house. And they have 2 much younger sisters who sleep in the room right next to theirs. And one night, one of the sisters tells Finn that it's weird that their mom checks on them twice at night. And Finn's like, what do you mean? And they say, well, mom puts us to bed and she checks on us then. But then later on in the night, we can hear her stomping down the hallway really loudly, and it wakes us up when we sleep. And the sister says, when I open my eyes, mom's just standing there in the doorway, and she never says anything, and she never moves, and it's like I blink and then she's gone. The sister even calls out to her like, Mom, what are you doing? And the mother never replies. Finn, hearing this, knows that isn't their mom, because if their mom heard them talking after they were supposed to be asleep, the kids would have gotten in trouble. She would have said something, like go to bed. It's not like her to just stand there silent. The other reason Finn knows this is because their mom has loud footsteps. Like I said, she's stomping down the hallway, and Finn's room is right next to their sister's. So they hear when their mom goes to check on them, and they never hear her come back. So something masquerading as their mother is coming to check on them in the night, then just standing there. A mimic? Some kind of weird attachment? Something else? I don't know, but stay spooky, friends.
This scary story from a follower comes with pictures, and you are not ready. So my follower's name is Avery, and at the time of this story happening, they were just a kid. And for the past 7 years that they had lived in this house, everything about it just set them on edge. You would hear creaking floors in the night, or you would feel like there was someone following you up the stairs when you knew you were walking up there alone. But every time that they tried to talk to someone about it, their family would really just brush it off. They would insist, no, there is something in this house, and more specifically, they claimed there was a demon in the cellar. Now, they included a picture of the demon, but they described it as a tall, humanoid type entity with a rooster head on its shoulders and claw-like hands, and they would never see anything but its silhouette. And this goes on for years and years and years. Avery is just seeing the weirdest stuff in this home, but when this story takes place, things took a truly terrifying turn. On this day, Avery is just sitting in their bedroom, which kind of shares the attic space with their friend, and they're just hanging out. Nothing weird is going on whatsoever. They're just hanging out, they're talking, and basically how they're sitting is Avery is sitting here and their friend is sitting here. And behind their friend is like one of the corners of this room. Suddenly, out of nowhere, their friend just jumps up at the same time that Avery starts staring at this corner. And neither of them say anything. They both just stare at the corner together. They both had the same feeling, the same petrified, like something is in that corner watching us feeling. As they were staring at the corner, a black mass began to form. It was literally like a shadowy mist in the corner that appeared out of nowhere. And they were so scared they couldn't even move. They were just standing there totally frozen, staring at this thing. And it slowly just disappeared. Avery says it felt really familiar despite the fact that it didn't look like this demon she had seen before. She just knew that was what this thing was in the corner, now in the attic, whereas she had always seen it in the cellar. Avery says that despite the entity looking different here, they knew it was the same demon they had seen in the cellar before. It had just taken on a different shape. They knew it. It felt so familiar in that moment. And it was really gratifying because previously when Avery had always told people, like, I swear to you, I see this thing throughout the house, nobody ever believed them. And now their best friend has just seen it too. This experience scared them so much. They never really talked about it after that day. But Avery says that their best friend saw the exact same thing, this black mass of a mist just appearing in the corner. Avery goes on to say that over time, they kind of put up spiritual boundaries and told whatever this thing was to leave them alone. And slowly but surely it did. However, they say that from time to time, they can still feel the presence lurking. They end off the email by saying, if anyone has seen anything like this and knows anything about the symbolism of a rooster's head, let me know. I'm sure Avery will be reading the comments here. Thank you so much to Avery for being a member of my YouTube channel. What do you guys think about this? Stay spooky, friends.
I really hope you guys enjoyed these. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And again, if you ever want to send me your scary stories to be featured in one of these videos or on TikTok or anywhere, you can do so by emailing me at loeylanestorytime@gmail.com. I'll have it listed down below. But hopefully you all enjoyed this. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I want to say an extra special thank you to my subscribers who are members of the channel. If you want to join the channel memberships and get extra members exclusive perks like members only videos, polls to help me decide on future video topics, members only updates, and so much more, you can click that little join button somewhere around the screen. We would love to have you. An extra special thank you to my VIP loves for their continued and generous support of the channel. I love and appreciate you all very, very much. I love you all very much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.